I don't know about you, but I've been feeling a little bit meh about my journal recently. That's not to say that I don't like the setups that I've been doing or the layouts that I've been including, but actually getting in and using it and feeling fulfilled in using it, that's been a bit of a struggle. Whenever I get these feelings towards my journal, the first thing that I like to do is really just think about why I might be feeling that way. Is it because the layouts that I've set up are too difficult to fill in? Am I just not making time to fill in my journal? Are there other things in my life that are causing me stress or are going on? For instance, right now, I'm sick. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice, but it is the reason this video is a little bit later than it was initially going to be coming out. And I did just have an international trip for about a week. Anytime I travel, I do find that my use of my journal does decrease, so those are probably some factors to consider. But I think in part it might just be that I'm getting a little bit bored with my layouts. It's one of these hard things as we kind of like strive for planner peace and finding these layouts that genuinely work for us. That in itself is a journey and a struggle, but then once we actually find those layouts, we run the risk of getting bored with our journal because we're setting it up in the exact same way every single month. To try and combat that slightly, I am changing things up just a little bit when it comes to May. So instead of starting with my actions list, I'm actually putting my reflections page first. It does feel a little bit weird to have something that I, specifically fill in at the end of the month, at the very start of the setup, but I'm keeping things fresh, I'm keeping myself on my toes, and I think it should work out. This also meant that I didn't have to do anything too particularly special for a cover page, because that's another thing that I've been finding difficulty with in this journal. I think it might just be the size of the square, because typically when I do a cover page, it's something decorative. I might doodle or draw something in as kind of like a main feature, but with the extra space in the square, and maybe because my style is just changing over time, I haven't been as inclined to draw things in my journal. That's also part of the reason why I'm going with this PET tape for the decoration. The theme for my journal setup is technically May flowers, but because it isn't spring where I'm based, I went with an autumn color palette. Here you can see I'm showing off how I get the backing off the PET tape because people do often complain that it's a little bit tricky. I find that just rolling my finger along the edge so that then the back of the sticky side sticks to the finger makes it so that I can actually pull that off the backing. It's a little bit hard to explain, but hopefully you kind of saw what I did. We're going to do it again coming up in the next clip. So just taking the PET sticker, effectively, that I've cut out, rolling my finger along the edge so that then the back sticks to my finger and using that to help me pull it up. It does take a little bit of practice, but I have found this to be the easiest and also safest way to remove the backing. Some people talk about either using tweezers or even a craft knife to try and separate it. I personally haven't found a lot of success with those, and they also just feel a little bit more dangerous because those implements are sharp. You'll have seen that I did end up putting some of the PET stickers down and then pulling them up because I didn't quite like how it looked. So really just opting for some corner decoration in the top left and bottom left. Once the decoration was in though, it was time to label those boxes. So for my reflection, I have a section for wins, one for challenges, 2 for memories, 1 for things that I want to try, and then 1 for things that maybe I need in my next setup. Once the reflections page was done though, then it's on to what would typically be the cover page, but is actually going to be my actions list. Of course, we have to have the typical "it's gonna be May" quote, because it isn't one of my May setups if I don't include it. Maybe one day I'll actually do an NSYNC theme, but I have no intentions at this stage. Along with the PET tape decoration, I'm also using a lot of craft paper in this setup. I thought that it matched really nicely with the color palette of the tape and also gives me those kind of like autumn vibes. As said, it's autumn where I'm based, and also I just love autumn. Like, I think it's probably my favorite season, so just wanted to embrace that fully in my journal. Of course, for any of the materials I've used in this setup, they are linked in the description box below. The tape in particular comes from the washi tape shop, and you can use code JashiiCorrin for 10% off if you want to order anything from them, because we love savings. Speaking about washi and PET tapes though, I have kind of run out of space in my drawers for how many I have, so I do very much think that I need to do some kind of a de-stash at some point soon. If that's something you'd like to see, do let me know in the comments. We could probably do it as a live stream, maybe have a giveaway or something, but in terms of the rest of the structure of this page, I'm keeping it super simple and just putting in 2 lists that I can fill in with the stuff that I need to do to work on my goals. Although it doesn't have a title, this is my actions list, so just the series of steps that I need to take to get things done. In terms of timing, this full spread took about 30 minutes from first touch of the pen to final erasings, but before we get into the next part of the setup, we're just going to have a look at how this month was going. For April, or cycle 1 of quarter 2, I went with a dragons theme, or kind of like a dragons and phoenix theme, because I again was using tape from the washi tape shop. It just made the decoration super easy. I loved the vibrancy of the color palette, and the designs of the tape, absolutely beautiful. But when it came to actually using my journal, my execution of this was quite varied. For the first fortnight or 2 weeks in the cycle, those ones got filled in really well. I was very active in my journal trying to get things done before my trip, but in the actual week of my trip and the week after, I was either away or unwell. That meant that my journal didn't get a lot of play during those points in time, but I'm hoping that now as we're moving into the next cycle, or the month of May, I'm gonna have a little bit more motivation to get in, jot things down, and get stuff done. I mean, first I kind of have to get over this dang sickness, but on this spread, we're setting up my monthly overview or cyclic overview. I do often still use the term monthly to describe it, even though it isn't actually a full month. Rather, it's a 4-week period, which I am actually calling a cycle. This is all part of my new planning style for this year, which we have a full separate video on, but this effectively acts as a monthly log. So just a summary of everything that's going on in the month, so I know when I need to work on what. This is very much the kind of layout where I really only use it at the start of the month, just to get a clear picture of what's happening. I don't really check back in on it all that much throughout the month, because normally once I get to the point where I've filled everything in on here, I kind of know what's happening when. I don't really need to check back in on it. This is something that I kind of used to get a little bit down on myself about, like, you're setting up these layouts, why aren't you using them? But technically speaking, I am using them, I'm just not using them all the time, and that's okay. Just need to give myself a little bit of grace in that respect. It's alright if we set up layouts that only have a very kind of limited span of use in terms of the time frame that they're actually good for, as long as they're still helping us, like they're fit for purpose, whatever that purpose may be. You'll have seen that throughout this setup, sometimes when I'm doing the horizontal lines, I'm using washi tape, like I've got here, just to make it so that those boxes of color are super crisp, super clean, whereas other times I just go in and freehand them. Typically it's based on which color I'm using, so on those ones where I'm using the washi tape, the color is a bit more saturated, a bit darker, which means that if it got a little bit wobbly, it would be much more noticeable. For the other horizontal lines where I'm just doing it freehand, those are using a much lighter color pen, so if it does get a little wobbly, it's not so noticeable, it's not so much of a big deal, and if I was gonna washi tape every single line I was doing, that would take so long. This cyclic overview spread in its entirety took about 29 to 30 minutes. Again, this is from first touch of the pen to final erasings, so it doesn't include idea generation time or sketching in time. Not that I did a lot of sketching in here, I really just plotted out where I wanted each of the columns to go, and then kind of changed where I wanted the rows to go when I went to do the setup. You can see that that final row along the bottom is technically one box taller than the other ones. It was mainly because I just wanted to finish on a light brown highlight, but I didn't necessarily want that for the rows above it because I didn't want the light brown right next to the dark brown. It's very much a style choice rather than like a functional choice, but I still like the way it looks, even though maybe it looks a little unbalanced, only if you dwell on it for too long. This is another layout where I opted for corner decoration rather than a full column of the florals. I kind of alternated that as I went through the setup, so on the first page we had the corners, second page we had the full length of the page, and then on this one, back to the corners again. I find that making these little changes as I go through help to distinguish the pages as slightly different from each other, keeps the visual interest there, but because we're using all the same materials, all the same color palette, everything looks very cohesive. The next layout I'm setting up took less time despite being across more pages, and this is in part because I did some of the decorative work and also some of the line work before I started recording. So while the time on film was like 20 minutes, in actuality it was probably closer to 30 as well, but this is what I call my work outputs layout. It's kind of what it sounds like. It's effectively all of the outputs that I have from doing my work, which, given the fact that content creating, making these idea videos and all of that is my job, a lot of it is kind of social media related. On this first page though, this is where I'm putting a summary of the releases, so noting down when they come out and grouping them based on what type of release it is. You can see that my column headers are course, photos, text, videos, and membership. Some of these are pretty self-explanatory, so videos are anything that's video related, essentially YouTube videos. Anything that's photos based is typically something posted on Instagram, and then anything in the membership column is done for the team with a capital T, our membership, which you can of course join. There are details in the description box, and we would love to have you with us. In terms of the course column though, this is stuff that I'm doing as related to the course that I'm going to be releasing, with that one being released to founding members halfway through May and being open to the public halfway through June. I want to record specifically what outputs I want to have for that at different set points throughout the month, so I'm summarizing those on this page as well. As for the sections that follow though, this is getting into a little bit more detail with what those releases are. So for instance, the video section to break down what videos are being released and the different stages of working on them. Similar idea for memberships, also for photos, and for my podcast. That podcast is the Planner Pals podcast, as hosted by myself and my mate Mark. It's honestly been so much fun. It's probably the most enjoyment that I've had content-wise in quite a while. Not to say that I don't enjoy making videos in general, but it's kind of nice to do it with somebody else. Otherwise, the content creating gig can be kind of lonely. I don't really have colleagues. Very much just me at home by myself working on videos, which does have its own perks, but it can still be a little bit lonely. To add a little bit more decoration down the left-hand side of this Dutch door that I've got, I'm just using the wreath designs from the PET tape, but not sticking the full wreath onto the page, just effectively taking little snippets of it and making this column of florals up the side. It's just a good example of the fact that like you don't have to use the full sticker or a full section of washi tape when you're putting it into your journal. You can kind of pick and choose elements and bring them together to make something a little bit different. It's a little bit more fiddly, but it can look really nice. Flipping over and onto the next spread though, this is where I'm going to be putting my trackers. Now previously for this year, I've been doing my trackers on a fortnightly basis, so having 2-week snippets rather than full month-long trackers, mainly because I was finding that month-long trackers weren't really working for me. But I wanted to experiment a little bit, wanted to change it up for this month. As mentioned, a little bit of boredom with my planner, so I'm thinking if I do something a little different, then maybe I'll be a little more inclined to use it. One of those changes is reintroducing month-long trackers. So on this page, I'm calling it my routines and meals layout. On the very left of the spread is where I'm putting in that routine tracker, which some may call a habit tracker, but these things aren't really habits for me yet. They're routines that I want to build into my schedule, but I wouldn't really consider them to be habitual. The section next to this is going to be for meals, and that's going to continue on to the next side of the spread. But right under the header and above the trackers, this is where I'm putting in my high bar, low bar for each of those routines. The routines that I'm trying to build, 4 of them are related to physical health and 1 of them is related to work. But having a high bar, low bar just helps me in making sure that I'm giving myself kind of partial credit for the days where I didn't necessarily do it to completion or in full, but I got started. For instance, if we think about this in terms of my exercise routine that I'm trying to build, this is the difference of doing a full 30-minute workout versus maybe getting on the elliptical for 10 minutes. On those days where I really wasn't feeling it, but I still managed to get those 10 minutes in, at least I can check something off on the tracker, give myself a little bit of credit for the fact that I did part of it. Each of those routines that I'm trying to build are just represented by an icon, and I like to pick icons that are pretty much related to the thing that I'm tracking. So a little sun for wake up time, a little dumbbell for exercise, so on and so forth. But now as the left hand side of the layout's in, it's time to work on the right, and this is where I did make a bit of a mistake. Started putting in those horizontal lines in not quite the right spot. Thankfully, I figured it out pretty soon into the piece, and I could have just continued doing it, but I decided to skip a line and get myself back on track, because I know I can just stick another piece of paper over the top, maybe even the cutoff from the Dutch door that we made on the last layout, and fix it up so it's as if that mistake didn't happen at all. It is still a little bit noticeable that there is a piece of paper stuck over the top here, but not so noticeable that it bothers me, and I'd rather have had all of those horizontal lines in the spot I actually wanted, rather than having to make my piece with them all being off. Sticking that in though, and then putting in the column headers for the actual tracker portion. Then it was time to think about how I wanted to decorate the rest of the page. I of course opted for more of the craft paper. I think that it just looks decorative in its own right because it's a different color to the rest of the page. It does make for easy decoration and filling in larger sections quite quickly. And then just sticking in some more of the florals from the PET tape. I opted only to do the lower right hand corner because I thought it balanced nicely with the one in the top left corner that was already there. As far as monthly or cyclic pages go, these are all the ones I have, but after this we get into where my daily logs are going. Normally I'd have some kind of fortnightly setup as well, where I summarize like going ons and putting in those trackers, but because I'm doing a monthly tracker, I don't need those this time around. It's going to be super simple, just daily logs where I write in the header for whichever day I'm working on, and then underneath that list out all of the things that I want to get done. Originally I was kind of planning on going in advance and sketching out exactly where I wanted each of the days to go, but because I am kind of running out of space in this journal, and having pre-sectioned out spaces for each day is usually a way to use up more space for me, I figured I would just do a build as you go approach, very similar to the original bullet journal method, even if just a little bit more decorative. Having a look at the layouts we set up in this one though, I am really chuffed with how they came together. I love this tape, I really love the color palette, very autumn vibes, but still florals for our May flowers bullet journal theme. If you wanted to see more May related bullet journal inspiration, then the playlist we have on screen here is the next one to check out. That one has all of my previous May setups and also our May theme ideas video. Those ones are worth a watch, so click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.